Companies have promoted DNA testing with the promise of revealing your heritage, presenting it as a definitive source of truth about your identity. They offer simple kits, implying that sending in your DNA will unlock your personal story. However, this narrative overlooks a significant issue. A substantial portion of African ancestry, potentially as much as 90%, has been obscured or omitted. This isn't an accidental oversight or a scientific limitation. It's presented as a deliberate exclusion by the very institutions that benefit from the data. The claim is that African DNA holds crucial insights into origins, resilience, and inherent power, which these entities prefer to keep hidden. This video aims to expose how African roots have been deliberately fragmented and misrepresented, with only superficial details being returned to individuals, while deeper truths remain concealed. It suggests that what you believed was a journey to reclaim your history through DNA testing was actually a controlled release of information, limited to what they deemed permissible. Currently, major DNA testing companies like AncestryDNA and 23andMe dominate the market, advertising their ability to pinpoint ethnic origins, tribes, and nations. Yet individuals of African descent often receive generalized labels such as West African, Sub-Saharan African, or broadly African. This lack of specificity contrasts sharply with the detailed breakdowns provided to individuals of European descent. A 2018 Vox report indicates that most DNA ancestry kits significantly underrepresent African populations, relying on reference data predominantly composed of European genomes. This imbalance is likened to trying to identify one's family in a photo album, where images of black individuals are scarce and faded, making accurate identification nearly impossible. The implication is that the system was fundamentally designed to exclude precise African ancestral mapping. Despite the existence of scientific and technological capabilities to identify specific African ethnic groups, the necessary investment, effort, and respect for accurate representation are said to be lacking. The argument is that African roots are not considered valuable enough to be meticulously mapped, only sufficient for marketing and selling test kits, denying African descendants the dignity of a full identity. This is presented not as a failure to deliver truth, but a conscious choice. Furthermore, African DNA is characterized as the most intricate, ancient, and potent genetic code globally, a fact acknowledged by scientists for decades. According to the National Human Genome Research Institute in 2020, African populations exhibit greater genetic diversity than all other populations combined. This means the earliest and most complex branches of the human family tree are African. Every genetic mutation, adaptation, and survival trait is traced back to African ancestors, who evolved under diverse natural conditions long before human migration out of Africa. Discussions among scientists about genetic markers for disease resistance, bone density, or mitochondrial variations often refer to African. The text suggests this inherent power in African DNA is precisely why it is feared and understudied. Fully mapping it would necessitate acknowledging Africa as the origin of humanity, not merely a historical footnote. Instead of celebrating this genetic richness, it is downplayed, simplified, and erased. Because African genomes are so diverse, they don't conform to the neat boxes designed for European genetic data. Rather than expanding their framework, they have reportedly narrowed African identity to fit an inadequate model, using vague terms like West African to encompass billions of people across a vast, diverse continent. The premise is that if individuals knew their DNA carried the blueprint for survival, human endurance, and the very original songs of creation, it would profoundly alter their self-perception and worldview, exposing the superficiality of the genetic information they receive. The methods behind this perceived deception are further explored, particularly concerning the databases used for DNA comparison. It is argued that these databases are not comprehensive global archives, but are overwhelmingly biased toward white populations. A 2016 Nature study revealed that over 80% of participants in genome-wide studies are of European descent, while African ancestry accounts for less than 2%. This massive disparity means that African DNA is being compared against a system that barely includes it, leading to generalized and vague results. The system was allegedly designed to fine-tune distinctions within European populations, e.g., Germans versus Swedes, Irish versus Scottish, or Northern versus Southern Italians, while lumping all African people into one broad category, ignoring distinct groups like Yoruba, Igbo, Wolof, Akan, Mandinka, Zulu, Maasai, Berber, or Nubian. This is presented as a deliberate choice, denying specific investment and recognition to African heritage. The text claims this is not true science, but systematic invisibility, designed to erase African presence from genetic databases and consequently from history, identity, and memory. To understand the erasure of African roots, the script traces the origins of modern Western genetic science, alleging that its foundation was not built to advance humanity, but to divide, rank, and justify the dominance of non-European peoples. Harriet A. Washington's medical apartheid is cited, emphasizing the deep entanglement of early genetic research with eugenics, a movement aimed at proving white racial superiority. Scientists reportedly manipulated data and used pseudoscientific methods to justify slavery, colonialism, forced sterilizations, segregation, and unethical medical experimentation on black bodies. The institutions involved, Harvard University, Rockefeller Foundation, Kaiser Wilhelm Institute, are presented as direct predecessors to modern laboratories that now collect DNA. The core argument is that this discriminatory mindset persists, albeit in a new form. Instead of skull measurements, they now analyze blood, controlling access to information about one's roots to chain identity rather than the body. The text suggests that if individuals knew the full extent of their ancestry, the dynasties, empires, and civilizations their DNA remembers, they would possess an unshakable confidence, viewing themselves as descendants of royalty, scientists, and warriors, rather than products of slavery, a realization that they cannot afford. This truth is allegedly hidden through percentages, vague categories, and locked archives, under the guise of science. The script then shifts to the commercial exploitation of African DNA. The MIT Technology Review 2019 is referenced, highlighting that pharmaceutical giants are actively collecting African DNA because it holds the key to new treatments, patents, and billion-dollar drug markets. The critique is that the African donors of this DNA rarely see any financial benefit. Companies like GlaxoSmithKline, Illumina, and 23andMe are accused of collecting African genetic material to develop drugs and accumulate wealth without returning ownership or profits to African communities. Moreover, biotech companies in Africa are reportedly forming partnerships to gather DNA from rural communities, sometimes without fully informed consent, offering minor incentives like food or health checkups. This is depicted as a modern iteration of historical exploitation, where African bodies were stolen during the slave trade, and now African genomes are being harvested for profit without equitable distribution of wealth. The narrative suggests that origins are renamed, genes repackaged, and stories erased, while individuals receive only crumbs of information in their DNA reports. The lack of specificity in DNA results for individuals of African descent is further emphasized. While Europeans receive detailed reports specifying percentages from various regions, tribes, and even specific counties, e.g., 47% Scandinavian, 32% Scottish, 18% Irish, specifically County Clare, black individuals often get generic terms like West African or broadly Sub-Saharan African. This generalization, covering over 1.2 billion people and hundreds of cultures, is presented as intentional, not accidental. The 2018 Vox report is again cited, claiming that commercial DNA tests oversimplify African ancestry due to insufficient research investment and the ease of selling vague results rather than confronting the complexity of African civilization. The underlying belief is that specificity in identity fosters pride, power, and connection, which is precisely what is being suppressed. If individuals knew they descended from powerful groups like the Yoruba, Igbo, or Akan, it would profoundly alter their self-perception and expectations. This is framed as psychological warfare, where vague labels keep individuals disconnected, making them more susceptible to manipulation and false narratives. The goal is to encourage individuals to dig up their true, rich, and royal. The text asserts that while history books and maps can be distorted and DNA results oversimplified, the truth of African ancestry lies within the blood and cells, too ancient and powerful to be buried. A 2017 Nature study is cited, reporting that ancient South African fossils contained DNA pushing back the timeline of modern humans by tens of thousands of years. This finding suggested that Homo sapiens thrived across Africa more extensively and diversely than previously acknowledged. The implication is that African DNA connects individuals to the very origins of humanity, encoding the survival, innovation, and adaptations of early ancestors. This rich genetic information is portrayed as a survival manual and a royal scroll. The reason for its suppression, it's argued, is that fully understanding the ancient, resilient, and world-shaping nature of African DNA would dismantle narratives of inferiority, shame, and brokenness, revealing instead a lineage of architects of civilization. Every cell, every drop of blood, every heartbeat is presented as a testament to this profound heritage. Finally, the text explores the reasons behind this alleged concealment. It suggests that if black people fully recognize their ancestral power, spiritually, biologically, and historically, systems of control would collapse. This knowledge would transform self-perception, leading individuals to see themselves as part of the royal bloodline of human existence, instilling confidence that makes them difficult to manipulate, market to, or divide. Identity is presented as power. Knowing who you are enables resistance against dehumanizing narratives and systems built on silence, demanding ancestral inheritance. This is why, it's claimed, there's underinvestment in tracing African roots, and African DNA remains understudied and misunderstood. A full connection of the African diaspora to its true history would end economic exploitation, cultural theft, and centuries of mental colonization. The assertion is that African blood carries memories older than pyramids, genes hold survival codes from the first humans, and the story begins with crowns, not chains. The ultimate goal is to break this enforced disconnection and remember that black excellence is eternal, not new. To reclaim this lost identity, several steps are proposed. 1. Choose African-led DNA services like African Ancestry, which focus on specific African lineages rather than vague percentages, believing in restoring identity. 2. Support African genome projects such as 54Gene, which aim to build African-owned genomic databases to control the narrative. 3. Demand transparency from mainstream DNA companies like 23andMe and AncestryDNA regarding data usage and African representation in their reference panels. 4. Learn African history beyond DNA, studying great civilizations, philosophers, and warriors. 5. Speak the names of tribes and nations, reclaiming what was lost and bringing memory home. The message concludes by emphasizing that despite attempts to bury the truth, it survives in the blood, bones, and heartbeats of generations, reminding individuals of their inherent greatness as descendants of kingdoms and empires, the living proof that Africa shaped history. This message serves as a call to action, encouraging viewers to share the video and proudly proclaim their rediscovered identity, recognizing that 90% of their African roots were hidden, but can now be known.